The upper echelons of the cosmic Marvel hierarchy are home to some of the wildest beings in the universe. From abstract concepts like eternity and death, to all-powerful, omnipotent beings like the Living Tribunal. The most well-known entity, however, has a hunger. This hunger isn't satisfied by regular old meals, oh no. He needs the life energy of entire planets. He is the being whose destruction maintains the balance between eternity and death. He is the great equalizer of the Marvel Universe. He is Galactus, the devourer of worlds, and his presence heralds your imminent destruction. Galactus' story doesn't begin in this universe though, or at least this incarnation of it. You see, the current existing Marvel multiverse is but one of many incarnations of the universe that has existed, being the 7th. In that previous 6th incarnation, the concept of science was introduced, with the scienceer supreme of the planet Ta being a woman named Taya, who would use her and a donor's DNA to genetically engineer a son, Galen. Taya, being the greatest scientific mind on her planet, had little time to care for her son, instead leaving him to be raised by technology. Ta would later find itself at the mercy of a universe-consuming plague, being one of the last remaining places left. A now older Galen would unsuccessfully attempt to find a way to save Ta, but instead of being killed, Galen, now the last surviving life form of the universe, was made to fuse with the dying universe, becoming the being known as Galactus in the process. Galactus is a name that strikes fear even in the darkest, coldest reaches of the Marvel Universe, and for good reason. Galactus is known as the Devourer of Worlds, an appearance from him or his heralds usually meaning all life in the vicinity is about to be consumed. As calamitous and indiscriminate as it may seem at first, Galactus consumes worlds for an important reason. Doing so satiates his hunger, which allows him to maintain his power, that power playing an important role in keeping the balance between death and eternity stable. In addition to that, the life energy Galactus consumes is preserved so that when the universe as we know it right now eventually dies, Galactus can pass it and his role on to another mortal survivor of the universe, a survivor that's strongly implied to be Franklin Richards. Galactus usually employs a herald, beings he imbues with the power cosmic, a near-limitless source of cosmic energy. His heralds serve to find planets for Galactus to feed on, and to announce his imminent arrival and their assured destruction. Though he's had many heralds over time, including but not limited to Terrax, Firelord, and Nova, no not the one you're thinking of, his most well-known herald by far is Norin Rad, the Silver Surfer. Now, I said earlier that the appearance of Galactus and his heralds usually mean imminent destruction, with usually being the important word there. The most famous time he's been repelled by a planet was Earth itself, by none other than the Fantastic Four. Galactus would make several attempts afterwards to devour Earth, though they'd also be repelled, partially due to how hungry he'd been. Galactus' power is proportionate to how much he's fed. If he's hungry and hasn't fed for a long time, his power wanes and he's at his most vulnerable. Being an entity beyond the full comprehension of most sentient life, Galactus' true form is never seen by those who gaze upon him, but appears in a form comprehensible to the species looking at him. Humans see him as a giant human, the Korean squirrels see him as a giant one of their own species, and squirrels, well, you get the picture. With all this power behind him, you'd have to think how someone this powerful could even be reasonably implemented into a fighting game, and the answer to that one is easy, as a boss of course. However, the road for Galactus wasn't quite assured at first. Former Capcom artist and resident comic translator for the Capcom devs Katsuya Akitomo, along with producer of Marvel vs. Capcom 1 Kenji Kataoka on separate occasions have mentioned that Galactus was originally the development team's choice for the final boss of Marvel 1. However, Marvel rejected the proposal, saying Galactus shouldn't be able to be defeated by anyone not on his level. However, Akitomo, an avid Marvel fan who'd been the primary driving force behind getting Capcom developers familiar with Marvel characters, shot back and actually cited his source, issue 243 of Fantastic Four, which featured the starving Galactus legitimately defeated by the combined forces of the Fantastic Four and the Avengers. Surely, they could just have Galactus be at his weakest because he hasn't consumed planets for a while and everything would be good, right? But Marvel still said no. Marvel would end up suggesting a few other potential bosses like Loki and Fin Fang Foom before Capcom and Marvel finally agreed on using Onslaught. However, Galactus would end up getting into the series as a final boss 13 years later in Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Though Marvel 3's plot is still pretty thin, as is the case for many a crossover game, the special comic that released with the special edition does give context for his appearance in the game. Dr. Doom and the other Marvel villains in the game, having made contact and formed an alliance with Albert Wesker, discuss how to invade the Capcom world, as no one can find sufficient power sources to maintain a portal that will allow direct access. Super Skrull chimes in and suggests that they siphon power from Galactus' world chip from under his nose, Doom and MODOK agreeing that it's the best choice. Of course, Galactus figures it out and gets royally pissed off, and now he's going to eat both the Capcom and Marvel worlds. Cue arcade mode. Galactus is very much a Versus series final boss in the same vein as characters like Apocalypse, Onslaught, and Yami, and that goes for his size as well. Like Apocalypse and Onslaught before him though, Galactus is actually playable in some versions of Marvel 3, but unlike them, isn't platform exclusive and has his own unlockable mode in every release of Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. Galactus is voiced in Marvel 3 by Jonathan Adams, who voiced Martian Manhunter in Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, the Monitor in Crisis on Infinite Earths, Vaatu in The Legend of Korra, Absorbing Man in multiple Marvel cartoons, and my personal favorite role of his, Kang in Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes. Despite just being a boss, there's still a fair bit of stuff to talk about with Galactus here, so let's get started. Galactus' boss fight in Marvel 3 plays out in two stages. The second stage is what you'd expect, a battle against a giant boss like in previous Marvel games. The first phase is pretty interesting though. You don't fight him directly, but instead take part in a reverse dramatic battle of sorts. Galactus will appoint two characters out of a group of either Wesker, Dormammu, Dr. Doom, or Akuma as heralds to fight your team. Their allegiance denoted with a silver sheen, obviously meant to evoke Silver Surfer, Galactus' most well-known herald. Though I imagine the implication is that he's imbued them with the power cosmic, they actually don't fight any differently than their regular counterparts. The fight begins with you fighting just one of them, but halfway through another will jump in. They share a life bar though, and this is generally what keeps the fight in check, since it's pretty easy to have one blocking an attack while the other is getting hit by it. After beating them, Galactus, annoyed that you've interrupted his feast, takes center stage and engages you directly. Because Marvel 3 has two separate soundtracks that you can switch between, there's actually 4 different themes associated with Galactus and the Heralds. The dynamic mode themes for the Heralds and Galactus are more orchestra driven, as is the classic mode theme for the Heralds. Galactus' classic mode theme is in the more melodic, energetic style of the character themes. Personally speaking, I think the standout of these 4 themes is Galactus' classic theme. The intro of the song really sells the abject terror of facing down something like Galactus. If you're playing Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 particularly, Galactus is playable in his own mode, but depending on the platform, has 2 ways he can be unlocked. On all platforms, if you attain 30k player points, Galactus mode gets unlocked. If you're playing the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360 release though, you have an alternate method. Having a save file from the original vanilla release of Marvel 3 unlocks Galactus automatically when you boot up Ultimate. To start Galactus mode, highlight Arcade mode, and then press the button combination displayed on the bottom of the screen. The buttons of course depending on the platform you're playing on. Of all the giant bosses in the Capcom Versus series, Galactus is easily the largest, absolutely towering over the cast in a way even Apocalypse and Onslaught's second form doesn't. But how well is he implemented as a fighting game boss? His beams do insane chip damage. Like most other series bosses, he has hyper armor. He surprisingly has some unique character interactions and even his own ending. And he's arguably the most fitting boss pick for a game about 2 separate fictional worlds crossing over. In spite of the above though, he's still pretty easy to fight, even on the highest difficulty. And there's some cut voice lines and unused data that imply that there were even more plans for him in-game. All of Galactus' moves are available to him in Galactus mode, but the game doesn't tell you the inputs, so I'll highlight them as we go. Like with previous boss videos, the emphasis here won't be so much on how to do the moves themselves, but instead how to deal with them as the player fighting against him. First off is a simple arm swipe. This has a pretty big windup and can be very easily blocked standing or in the air. Galactus, being so powerful in the comics, usually needs entire armies of characters to even stand a chance of surviving him, though he'll often casually just swat folks away with his arm like they were nothing. Next is a falling palm smash. Block this one high. Galactus can also flick opposition away as if they were a gnat. This is also a snapback and will force your character out. If you're on your last character when this happens, it'll inflict a hard knockdown instead. For this attack, Galactus will conjure an orb of energy and bring it down on his opponent. This can be blocked and won't outright kill from full health, but there's a much more dangerous version of this attack we'll talk about later. Next up is a fist smash. It should be noted that pressing the button for this 3 times rapidly will have Galactus chain 3 of these together, and the AI will occasionally do this as well when fighting him. Be sure to be blocking high or in the air, as this will clip anyone blocking low. Galactus can also just straight out slug you. This can be done 3 times in a row like the aforementioned move, and also hits OTG. It's a good thing the AI pretty much never changed this move, since 3 of them can outright kill most characters. Next is a standard finger laser. Like the previous moves, this can be chained up to 3 times, and the AI actually does frequently utilize this. Push blocking is the best defense against this, as the chip damage from this adds up otherwise. Galactus also has an eye laser as well. Away with you. This one does a ton of damage if it hits you, but the best way around this one is to just get as close to Galactus as possible if you see him rear back, as the startup will sail right over your character's head. You may have to crouch with taller characters like Sentinel though. Eye beams are one of the most common methods of energy projection Galactus has utilized, though in older comics they were usually yellow. In more modern comics they tend to be blue, as seen in game here. Galactus has what essentially amounts to a command grab, grabbing the opponent and slamming them down into the ground for massive damage.
Feel my wrath. Feel my wrath. Suffer for your arrogance.
The grab is something of a capture state, but calling an assist or simply mashing can also break your character out of his grip if you're fast enough. In the comics, Galactus has literally clapped a few characters that simply swatting away wouldn't be feasible with, like Beta Ray Bill. Though Galactus has no super meter, he does have hyper combos denoted by the visual flash effect that usually precedes hyper combos for the rest of the cast. The first one is a souped up version of his finger laser. This does a ton of chip damage, and even more regular damage if not blocked, but like its weaker counterpart, is mostly a non-issue if you push block. Galactus has an even more devastating move where he'll fill the screen entirely with finger lasers and eye beams, sweeping across the stage.
You are defeated. Yield to me. Die. Level 4. You are broken.
This attack is incredibly dangerous, and even if you push block, it's going to either leave you near death or kill you outright. Generally speaking, popping X Factor and blocking is the best way to avoid this, since X Factor protects you from chip damage. Galactus' most notable move, however, has him, similarly to an earlier move, conjure an orb of energy. This time though, he slowly charges it and raises it above his head, the energy changing color from blue to red. Upon being fully charged, he slams it down on the opponent, instantly killing them outright, regardless of remaining health or X Factor. This can be interrupted however. Hitting Galactus with multi-hit moves can stagger him out of this, and hitting his face in particular will stagger him even quicker. If you have a character that doesn't have too many multi-hit moves, or really any moves that can be chained quickly, well, good luck I guess. Before we move further though, time to talk comics. Galactus, being one of the oldest and most powerful forces in Marvel, is a fixture of a lot of stories, particularly in the Fantastic Four and cosmic side of Marvel. I already gushed about Annihilation in Nova's video, and as I said there, Galactus is a big part of that story, playing a particularly huge role in its climax. I've also talked about Jonathan Hickman's stellar Fantastic Four run way back in Dr. Doom's video, and Galactus is in that as well, once again playing a large part in that run's climax. Speaking of Fantastic Four, John Byrne's run with the title, one of the most beloved for the team, also prominently features Galactus, including the aforementioned issue 243 of that run, and the fallout from that story culminating in the story The Trial of Reed Richards, which is also an important touchstone in Galactus' relationship with Marvel's first family. On the subject of John Byrne, he was also behind The Last Galactus story, a tale that would have told what would have been, well, the Last Galactus story far later down the line in the Marvel Universe. Unfortunately, Byrne was never able to finish this story, being left on a cliffhanger instead, though he still shared what the ending would have been via interviews in the following years. Al Ewing's Ultimates had a really fantastic take on the character that kinda changed his status quo for a bit and took him in some really interesting directions. The first half of Thanos' 2003 miniseries by Jim Starlin also prominently features Galactus as well. I'll be honest, Al Ewing's Ultimates was going to be my general recommendation for this video, but the more I thought about it, the more I felt like there's one Galactus story in particular that should get the nod. It's not only the most important Galactus story, but one of, if not the most important Marvel stories ever published. It's going to sound like a bit of a cop-out here, because it's the one Galactus story everyone knows due to being adapted time and time again, including for the recent movie. But it's been adapted because it really is just that damn fine of a story, especially impressive considering when it was published. You may or may not jive with this one, but hey, at least let me plead my case. This video's comic book recommendation is the Galactus Trilogy, comprised of issues 48, 49, and 50 of the original Fantastic Four run by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. This story actually starts off resolving the events of the previous issue involving the Inhumans. You don't really need more content than the issue itself gives you, but if you want to seek it out, by all means. Lee and Kirby's Fantastic Four is probably rivaled only by Lee and Ditko's Spider-Man as the best Marvel book of that era. But if you know anything about Galactus and the Fantastic Four, you probably know the gist of the story without me even having to go into detail. Silver Surfer shows up, heralds Galactus' arrival, the Fantastic Four try to appeal to Silver Surfer's noble side, and he rebels against Galactus and the Earth is saved. But what is it about this story that makes it one of the most enduring tales in the history of the company? Well, I think it comes down to a few things. First and foremost, the scale of it all. Prior to the coming of Galactus, comic book stories on this massive scale just didn't happen. Certainly not in the 1960s anyway. When coming up with the story, Lee and Kirby very specifically wanted to introduce an antagonist different from what had been seen in comics at the time. Most villains were either gangsters or other costumed evildoers with pretty easy to understand morality, or lack thereof. Lee particularly wanted an antagonist that was well above anything that had ever come before, which is where the idea to make him a godlike being was born from. Jack Kirby particularly cited the Bible as his inspirations for Galactus and Silver Surfer, saying he wanted to design godlike beings that were beyond the opinions and reach of those below them, with Silver Surfer particularly being a fallen angel analog. Second is its legacy. Yes, it introduced Galactus and the Silver Surfer and the dynamics with the greater Marvel Universe that would come into play in the years to come, but it also cemented an entire space of Marvel that could exist outside of just the normal costumed heroes. Lee and Kirby had already done a bunch of world building for the space outside of Earth in previous Fantastic Four issues, by introducing alien races like the Skrulls, but the Galactus Trilogy blew the door wide open for even further expansion. I already talked about how Annihilation basically constructed modern Cosmic Marvel as we know it today, but Cosmic Marvel and many other aspects of the universe quite literally would not exist without the foundation that this story lays. The third and final aspect, and in my opinion, the story's secret sauce, is in its pacing. Let's be real, the vast majority of Marvel books from the 60s can be a slog to read for a lot of people. Overly wordy, filled with a bunch of now outdated turn of phrases, art that usually isn't anywhere near as kinetic or detailed as what you see today. There's a lot of reasons why I can understand why people would be hesitant to even touch them. And even Lee and Kirby's Fantastic Four run overall falls into some of these things, particularly early on when the team dynamics are still being developed and the character relationships haven't completely solidified yet. The Galactus Trilogy, though, marks a point where Lee and Kirby start firing on all cylinders, delivering a 3-act story that moves at a breakneck speed while still allowing readers to sit back and take in every detail of the scenario. From the Silver Surfer ominously making his way to Earth while the planet's denizens erupt into a panic in issue 48, to the Watcher sending Human Torch on a quest to obtain the one device that can stop Galactus, with some of the absolute most mind-bending Jack Kirby art this side of Fourth World, it's just a stone cold classic. As far as early Marvel stories that stand with, if not eclipse some of the best stuff in the history of the publisher, the Galactus Trilogy is up there with If This Be My Destiny is one of the greatest stories ever told in Marvel. It's not just a defining Galactus story or even a defining Fantastic Four story, it's a defining Marvel story in general, and I think later all-timers like the Dark Phoenix Saga and Infinity Gauntlet stand on the shoulders of this giant. Also, completely unrelated to Galactus, the issue directly following this Galactus story, This Man, This Monster, is one of the single greatest Fantastic Four stories of all time. Read it if you get the chance. Galactus is normally only supposed to be playable in Galactus mode, but through save editing, people were able to enable Galactus as a character in normal play, with hilarious results, even being able to take him online. Interestingly enough though, he actually has text win quotes if you play as him in this method. If you lose to him normally in arcade mode, he only has voiced victory dialogue. He even has an unused text win quote for Deadpool. His voice line upon defeat is pretty weird though.
You have saved the Earth. I now must squash you like the bug that you are.
It almost feels like this was either meant to play when he gets staggered halfway through his HP bar, or maybe there was even an additional phase for him planned. Galactus does have special dialogue with characters that can be heard normally though.
If you can be a god, then what shall we call Galactus?
This quote is directly lifted from a panel in issue 161 of Thor by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby.
I am not without mercy. You may serve as my friend. Much like the Fantastic Four, you are nothing to me.
Surrender is your only option.
What does Earth's mightiest heroes mean to one who rules? Why do you laugh in the face of your own destruction?
Check me out! I'm the ghost of Christmas Kick Your Ass!
Where is your laughter now? The ancient forces you draw upon mean nothing to
One does not
as
require
old
the eye of Agamotto to see this outcome.
You dare pit your mystic arts against the power cosmic. Arrogant fool! No amount of training can prepare you for Galactus.
Come on. Fight!
Congratulations. You have doomed your world. I remember your homeworld. It was delicious.
There's far too much trash in the universe.
You and your race are a dying breed.
The Skrull homeworld was devoured by Galactus in issue 257 of Fantastic Four during John Byrne's run. Galactus also uniquely has an ending as well. It can be viewed in both Vanilla and Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 if you get a game over to him in arcade mode, and in Ultimate specifically, it'll also play if you beat Galactus mode. You know, having had Magneto, Thanos, Apocalypse, and Onslaught as bosses in prior Capcom fighters, Galactus being the final boss of Marvel 3 just feels right, you know? He also joins the club of Fantastic Four characters that have gotten in the series over the Fantastic Four themselves. I do appreciate that more so than the previous bosses, his presence here isn't just an excuse to have something big to fight at the end of arcade mode, but actually makes sense within the conceit of the game itself. Giving him a playable mode is also pretty neat, even if it does get old pretty fast. It still irks me that Onslaught and Apocalypse are only ever playable in older, harder to track down versions of their respective games, so Galactus has a leg up there at least. Galactus doesn't appear as a final boss in too many other Marvel games, probably for the same reasons that kept them out of Marvel 1, but LEGO Marvel Superheroes notably also features him as the final boss, which is neat. That's going to do it for this video. As always, thanks for watching, and a special thanks to the patrons that support the channel. Take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.